Welcome back to episode 11 of the Flying Goat Farm podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the American wool textile industry. But before that, here's what's happening on the farm. We are in the throes of more canning and pickling and all that kind of stuff, harvesting what's in the garden and what's in the orchard. We have so many tomatoes, which is great because last year we had to buy tomatoes to make sauce. This year we do not have to, so that's wonderful. Yesterday we canned pears. I use a extra light syrup formula that's like 20% sugar. It's still plenty sweet enough. And my secret recipe for that is that I also add in a vanilla bean. I love the flavor of pears with vanilla. So if you are thinking about doing some canning of your own, think about adding some unexpected herbs and spices when you're canning things to make it your own. We also finished up the end of the cucumbers. I don't know how many, we have pints and pints and pints and pints and pints of dill relish that I've talked about before. And I think we're done with that. So that's good. Dill pickle relish is just simply so good on everything. It's a little bit unexpected. And we couldn't even find a recipe for it. So we just used the cutting up directions for the sweet pickle relish. And then we used the same brine and flavor profiles that go into our kosher dills. And so we get the best of both worlds. So that's really exciting. If you've listened to me enough, you also know that the fall fiber festivals are about to get underway. So we have one in Virginia at the end of the month. And then, of course, Rhinebeck is in the middle of next month in October. So if you are coming out to fiber festivals, please look us up. We love to put names to faces and love to see people who know about us. So let's talk about the American textile industry. I'll start by talking a little bit about ASI, which is the American Sheep Industry Association. It's a national organization that represents sheep growers from all over the U.S. They have many different programs. They give out grants. They lobby Congress for better benefits from in the farm bill. Sheep tend to not get very many perks as opposed to the beef industry or the crop industry. So ASI is our lobby association as well. One program that they have is to educate and certify wool classers. And I have talked about being a wool classer in this series and also earlier, maybe in my first season when I was talking about farm yarn. So a wool classer is a person who is on site when shepherds are doing shearings. And a wool classer is a person who grades the fleece as they come off the sheep. They pick up the sheep from the floor and they take it to a skirting table. They do some table skirting to get off any things that shouldn't be in there. And then they grade the fleeces according to if they're uniform, meaning that the same fleece, the fleece is relatively the same on the front leg as it is in the middle of the back as it is on the back leg. So you want to have a uniform fleece. They look at the microns. They're not testing microns, but you can tell which is a finer fleece and which is a coarser fleece. And especially with a lot of practice, you get to be very good at knowing what, kind of the range of these microns. They're looking for faults that could be you have paint on them. They have, something that is not going to be easy to get out, or like in our area, maybe they got into brambles, and so you've got really awful seed pods in the fleeces and stuff like that. And they're also looking for breaks in the fleece where for some reason the animal got sick, or there was some change in the nutrition or something like that that causes there to be a um, a break or a reduction in the uniformity of each individual fiber. And so that becomes a problem in those fleeces because they're not going to be long enough. They also look for length of the fleece. They needs to be at least 3.5 inches. And they also are looking for the end use of the fleece. Is this going to be going into commercial yarn? Is this going to be going to the hand spinning market? Is this going to be, taken and made into blankets? That kind of thing. And so it gets sorted. All these different fleeces would get sorted into different bags in different areas according to all those factors. To become a classer, the first thing you have to do to be a level 1 is you take the class. It's a 2-day class, I think, maybe 3. And you have to take a test. That gets you level 1. You take and pass the test, I should say that. But it's an open book test, so there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to pass it. Then level 2, you've got to class 100,000 pounds of fleece under the direction of a level 3 classer. This can be really hard in today's world because we simply don't have the wool pools that we used to have, where people from all over the state of Maryland or all over the state of New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Virginia would bring all their yarn together, or not yarn, all their wool together. It would be pooled together. We would do these same kind of grades and sortings according to what kind of fleeces they were. And then we would sell these whole big amounts of wool to the wool industry. When we were doing the Maryland wool pool, we got between 30 and 50,000 pounds of wool sorted and graded in a day. And that's a lot. It was a hard day, a fascinating day, but a hard day. And you also have to go out to smaller farms that maybe have 1 or 2 different kinds of breeds and work with those farmers as well under the auspices of a level 3 classer. To become a level 3 classer, you have to go and have experience outside your home area. So if it's somebody that's on the West Coast, they should be coming to the East Coast to see how we do it, and vice versa. If I want to go to attain my level 3, I'm going to need to go to the West somewhere and work under a level 3 classer or level 4 classer out there. And you also have to take the mill tour. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today because I just got back from the mill tour. And there is a level 4, and that's someone that's usually associated with the university, and it's somebody that is, whose whole work in this area is about educating people, as opposed to actually doing the classing themselves. So we did go on this mill tour. It's been a lot of years since they've done a mill tour on the East Coast, and that delay didn't have really anything to do with the pandemic, but it also didn't help. So we were able to see the entire process from fleece to fabric. We went to 3 different factories. We saw all the way up to weaving. We did not see the knitting factories, but we did get to see the weaving factories. And it's interesting to note that all 3 of these factories are part of multinational corporations. They are not American owned. And the weaving and the yarn factories are also, they're involved in making the dress uniforms for our military, which is probably keeping them kind of in business because in order for the military to purchase textiles, cloth, to make those uniforms, it has to be made in the United States, and it has to have a preponderance of American-made fiber within there, within the fabric. So, yay for the United States for making that be a hoop that people have to jump through to get those military contracts. So the process begins, and we began right at the beginning of the process. We started at Chargé's, which is a French-owned company, and this factory, they go from fleece to comb top. That's their little niche that they do. They have several different lines of top that you can buy, and they're based on the average diameter in microns. So from the very finest at like 16 or 17 microns, all the way up to what we would classify as a medium wool at 30 microns. There's a whole lot less applications for wools that are at the higher micron range. The lower microns are what is being used for apparel, because we want soft and we don't want scratchy. So they will have like a 16 micron line, a 17 micron line. They might even have a 17 and a half micron, and then an 18 and a 19, so on and so forth. When they get up to maybe 24, it might be some more of a range that would be like 24 to 26 and so forth, because there's not as many differences between those fleeces that are in the medium range, and there's, again, not as many applications for them. So first they blend the fleeces and from 500-pound bales. Then the wool is scoured, which is another fancy word for being washed. Then it's carded, and then it's combed into top. And then a small percentage of that top is treated to become superwash. So the difference between East and West fleeces are radical. So sheep growers in the West, they grow a very uniform product. They have large-scale operations that maybe they run 1,000 or 2,000 head on grasslands, and it's just one breed, or maybe it's one or two breeds. They mostly grow fine wools such as Rambouillet, Merino, and Debouillet. As I said, their fleeces are very uniform as well, and they're very, very fine. Sheep growers in the East do not have a uniform product. We are mostly small growers, and many of the shepherds grow a variety of breeds. They also have smaller flocks in general. It's unusual to see anyone in the East that has more than, say, 100 or 120 ewes in their program. It's because we have smaller plots of land to run our sheep over, as opposed to if you're thinking about Montana or Dakota or Wyoming, where you have the big wide prairie grasslands that the shepherds can run their flocks over. Also in the East, because we're growing a variety of breeds, our fleeces are not uniform. And the microns are all over the place. For instance, I have fine wool sheep. So I have a lower micron product, but maybe the person next door, they have a medium wool sheep. Maybe they have a Romney, or maybe they have meat sheep like Cheviots, but they're still in the medium category. And yeah, in the East, we have a lot of medium wools and not very many fine wools. Certainly not in the volume that the West Coast has, or West, or Midwest. So Chargé's brings in fleeces from these big warehouses. The warehouses, they bale up fleeces that have been classed, and they have been tested for strength and length and micron. So in each, the bale may be a bale of 17 micron on average fleeces. There's 500 pounds of them in that bale, etc. So the first step is to blend the bales so that you get a product that can be made throughout the years, knowing that fleeces change over time. Even if you have the same flock, your fleeces are going to be can be a little bit different from one year to the next, depending on, weather variations, feed variations, other kinds of stresses that you may have. But Charget's needs to have a consistent product. So they will take, they have them marked in like an ABCD pattern, and maybe, so if they want to make it, let's say a 17 micron top, they're going to take 2 bales of A, 1 bale of B, and 2 bales of C, or something like that. There's a recipe that they are making that they can consistently provide that same top throughout the years, and it's not going to change because they're not going to run, because they're blending things. They're not necessarily going to run out of something and have to discontinue that line. So the fleeces are that, they're taken out of those bales, they're picked apart in a giant picker. It was bigger. It was kind of surprising when we were there, because like as we're standing there kind of looking at this picker and then looking at the big tumbler where the fleeces then go through this tumbler where they're kind of mixed up as well. And we're standing there looking at it while the owner was talking to us, and like 2 people came out of that machine. I mean, they could have had a party in there. There's probably enough room to fit maybe, 8 or 10 people in it. That machine was so big. So we all kind of laughed about that. It was quite interesting. After it gets tumbled to mix them up, then there's an 8-chamber scouring machine. It's the size, I think it's the size of like a semi-trailer. And each chamber has differing temperatures and amount of detergent and that kind of thing. And as it goes, it's starting at the beginning, it's going to be very dirty. It's probably not going to be as hot. They're trying to get the dirt out first, and then they're going to go for getting the lanolin out a little bit later. So, and heating up the wool slowly as it moves through those chambers. It's all computerized as far as the temperature and adding the detergent. And at the end, there's a big dryer that it goes through, and it's washed fleece. Then the wool is taken to the carders. So a carder is a machine that will start to align the fibers in one direction. And these carders were at least 8 feet tall, maybe 10 feet tall. And they were probably 8 to 10 feet wide. And so it's a big drum that has teeth on it, like you would see on a cat comb, or a cat brush or a dog brush. And they go in 2 opposing directions. So it's like they're combing, even though it's called a carder, they are combing those fibers and making them into alignment. And then what they call sliver is coming off of those cards and then going into a bin. And it comes off, it looks like a sheet, like a gossamer sheet. It's like one piece coming off. If you're listening to this podcast, also know you can go to my YouTube channel or the Vimeo channel, and you can see the PowerPoint that I'm using, and so you can see pictures of these machines. So then the sliver is again put into a bin. They look like they're big round, maybe 100-gallon bins that have wheels on them. And so it's easy for the workers to move bins from one machine in one area of the factory to another machine in another area of the factory. So then they are taken to the combing machines, and that's when that gets to work. And within the combing machines, that's where they finish aligning all the fibers. A comb top means that all of the fibers are going all the same way. In a sliver, they are kind of going the same way, but there are lots that aren't going the same way. So it's a little bit more airy. It's a little bit more disorganized in a sliver or roving. But when it gets to comb top, it's very smooth, it's very uniform. The combs have also taken out a lot of the veg matter that is still left in those in the fiber, and it takes out the very small unaligned fibers that they're so small that they can't really be combed, and we call those noils, Noils. Finally, the last step that is done to some of the top, but not all of it, is to make it superwash. And here, what they do is they take that comb top and they then put it through another machine which has liquid in it that contains some kind of a polymer. Of course, they weren't going to tell us what the polymer was. They did say it was not plastic, but it's some kind of polymer that is added to the surface of the fiber. And what it does is it encases all those scales that are on the outside of the wool. So it makes it very smooth. And that means that the wool won't felt, and it means that the wool won't shrink. So that was chargés. And so they're going from fleece and they're ending a comb top that is either non-superwash or superwash. Next, we went to a Burlington plant in Rayford, and it blends the wool and sometimes polyester. It dyes those tops and spins it into yarn. And this plant also does a lot of the finishing of the woven fabric. So they come back from the weaving factory to have the finishing done. They come back to this factory. And so the wool top comes in from chargés, and the polyester, I don't know exactly where it's coming from. I believe it's probably China. The polyester is sent through a cut and crimp machine that makes a staple length that's similar to that of the wool that they're going to use. So that has to be, controlled. If you're getting a 17 micron top from chargés, and they know, it's a 3.5 or it's 4 inches, whatever the average staple length is, they're going to cut the polyester to be that same length, and then it goes through a crimp machine, and it makes this and it actually, when it's out of the crimp machine, it actually looks like a really nice fine crimpy wool like what I have, because it has the perfect crimp in there too. So this building, it was huge. I think they said it was 10 acres under one roof, and they have many different processes going on throughout the plant. We started in the dye area, and so the wool and the polyesters are dyed in different processes. So, there's one whole bank of big vats that are just for the polyester, and the same for the wool. That's because the polyester has to be treated with different kinds of dyes than the wool does. They're big, giant vats that they put. It looks like they're like vertical colanders, that they fill these vertical colanders with the top, and then they put these colanders inside of the vats and close the vat. It adds in the water, it adds in the dye, it adds in some pressure, I believe, too, to make sure that the dye is going inside of those colanders, and that it's moving, that the dye is moving in and out, so that you get, a nice even distribution of your dye. And then once the dyeing is done and it's rinsed and it's dried, then they're going to be blending the wool and the polyester to get the blends that they want. Some of them are 75-25, some of them are 50-50. It depends on the specs of that cloth. And they blend them so that they can get the colors that they need that also meet the specifications of the end user, whether it's in fabrics that are going to be going into workplaces or hotel lobbies, that kind of upholstery thing, or whether it's going to be going to the military for uniforms. They have to be the colors that the people are expecting them to be. The color matching room, the color lab was really cool, because what am I? I'm a dyer, so it was really cool to me. They take samples all along the way of the processes, and then they take several different samples within, a piece of the comb top that they've made, and they make these little felt pads. They kind of look like they're about the size of what you might use, those cotton pads that you would use to take off makeup. And there's a machine that just does that. That like you put in the wool at the top, and you put this. It looks like a plunger, like a piston. They put it in a little bit of soap, and I guess there's hot water and there's agitation, and when it comes out, and it is this little felt pad. And then they even have a special dryer for many of these pads. It was very cool. So then it's taken to the computer to be analyzed for the accuracy of color. And of course, they take extensive records of what recipes are used for each line of the yarn, and the percentage, because as you can, there are some of these products that were just like half and half wool and polyester, and there were some that like had two wools and one polyester. There was one that had two polyesters and one wool, and so they're keeping these samples out. They have the samples of the little pads. They have samples of the comb top of both of the wool and the polyester, and then the combination of the two, and then they have a woven sample as well. So that room was really cool. I liked it a lot. I would work in that part of the plant, I think. So then, after everything's blended, everything's dyed, and everything is, yes, this is the color that we want. This is the right thing. We don't have to change anything. There are no seconds here, yada yada. Then it's going to be remade into that comb top. And then that comb top is going to be put through row after row after row of machines, where it is pin drafted, which means that they're applying pressure to it to make it go from something that is the size of a hose that you might use to water your plants, to the size of a pencil, the diameter of a pencil. And so each successive bank of machines takes it to a smaller and smaller diameter. And your ball will get bigger and bigger, right? And then those cones are taken to the spinning machines, and that's where the top is spun and it's put onto a bobbin. And then some of them are left as singles, depending on what the specifications are. Some of them are going to be left as a single, and oh my gosh, the singles are less than the size of sewing thread. They're very, 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 very small, very thin. And some of them are plied, so they're made into a 2 or 3 ply at a different machine. Again, up to whatever specification there is. So next we went to the different factory. I'll talk about the finishing at the end. Well, going back, we didn't actually go back again. We saw everything in that one factory and then went to the different factory. But I'm going to do this chronologically so that you get a sense of all the different processes that are happening to make this cloth that we wear on our bodies. So we went to a different Burlington factory, and this one is where they have the looms. So they take all of the yarn that was just made at the Rayford factory, and they put it onto the back beam under tension so that everything is kept very taut. That's the one thing about weaving, is that everything needs to be at the same tension so that you can get a nice, good cloth out of it. So they had 2 lines of machines that were going. One they said has really saved their company since the pandemic, which was making polyester fabrics that are used in emergency rooms, are used as PPE, are used in the hospitals. For those looms, they can put over 6,000 yards of those synthetic warps onto one beam. That's huge. And of course, that means that those threads are also minute. They're very, very thin. For the wool warps and the wool polyester warps that they're using for the military, they have about 1,500 to 2,000 yards on those back beams. So first they put all of these yarns onto the back beams, then they thread them through the heddle, and then they load them up onto the machines, onto the looms. And the looms are controlled by computer. And when they weave, it's amazing. They're weaving like 500 to 900 picks per inch, depending on what kind of fabric it is. That's not right. They're weaving 500 to 900 picks per minute, not per inch, per minute. So they're going extremely, extremely fast. You can't even hardly see how fast that they're going when they're working like that. So this is a good time to talk a little bit about people power, because on those polyester looms, where there is 6,000 yards on one back beam, there's one weaver for every 40 looms, 40 looms. So if I'm working that, I have to watch for mistakes and for the machines break, like a thread breaking or something happening, maybe running out of weft. I'm in control of 40 of those looms. On the wool looms, there's one weaver for maybe every 15 to 20. So you have half as many looms to oversee, but it's because there are many more breaks on those wool machines. Those wool machines have a failure about once every hour, whereas the polyester machines have a failure maybe 1 or 2 times per their whole shift. And they are working longer shifts. They're doing four 10-hour days, and some people are doing 3 12-hour days. So if you're the weaver, then you have to fix that break, and then you have to move back in the dobby on the computer, move back to where the break happened, so that it can be fixed and then started over again. So it's I think it would be a kind of a stressful job. You're on your feet the whole day, and you have to pay attention to what's happening with all of these various looms. So at the start of each cloth, they do a small sample of the weaving. It was like maybe 10 inches. They cut it off, and they have a little lab there in this plant, where they look for any cross threads. They look for any threading errors. They look for any kind of problem that they can fix on the loom before it really gets started. So those women and there were 2 women that were working in there, they have a lot of responsibility. Once the fabric is woven, then it's taken back to the yarn plant for inspection and finishing. And the woven lengths that they're getting are about 200 yards at a time. And they had a whole line of workers who were looking for any bits of veg matter or noils, or any kind of problem that was in the cloth, and they would pick them out. They would cut them out. They were using tape to kind of pick up any of the veg matter and that kind of stuff. If there's a significant problem, then they try to fix it with a needle and thread. We didn't get to see that, but when you're thinking about fabrics that are this fine, I'm sure that they would have to do it under magnifying glass or something. And then the finishings that they have at this plant were really varied. There were fire retardants. some waterproofing that was going on. And then the fabrics are all washed and fulled. Fulling means, there's some agitation involved so that, all the threads get realigned. And in some cases, the fabrics are shaved to make a more shiny surface. So we heard a lot about the current issues that these factories were having. They are still having supply chain issues, just like everybody else. They do have issues with some of the fine wools. A lot of people either, went out of business, or, or are sitting on their wool, not taking it to the warehouse. So there is some problem with fine wool in the supply chain, and also polyester is also in short supply. Their biggest issue in all three factories was complaining about the lack of workers, and we're hearing that from every single industry, right? In the past years, they hired people who had already worked in factories before, or if they were going to hire a weaver, that person had kind of worked themselves up inside of that factory, and then they became a weaver. They already kind of knew what the job was about. They kind of already knew what this working in a factory was like, but now they're just hiring off the street. And so they're getting people who have never worked in a factory. Maybe they are people that have worked in fast food and now they're coming to a factory. But they're also seeing a lot of lack of commitment in the workers, and they complained that people can't seem to work a 4-day week. I don't know. That's what they said. It hurts my heart to hear that. Each of these plants, they had incentive programs so that you could make more pay based on your output. For instance, a weaver can make up to $28 an hour based on his or her output at the machines. And at this time, there's also kind of a bubble in their supply chain where the finishing machines are waiting for fabric to come from the looms, and that's because they don't have enough workers to run the looms. So there's it's all kind of interconnected, and so when you have a problem in one part, it's going to bleed over into the next step in the process. And also they complained about increasing costs, that shipping costs are up. When products are coming over from overseas, like the polyester, the shipping becomes astronomical. And as we saw earlier, like in 2021, there was that, all those ships were, docked off of California because there was nobody to offload them and nobody to drive them. So shipping can be a problem. And then in all of these places, since they're having this problem with keeping labor, their training costs are going up because they're training people who stay for maybe a month, or maybe they stay for 6 months, and then they go on to something else and they have to get another person and train that person. So their training costs have also been radically different. So if you're a shepherd, where does that lead us? I think for what I gleaned out of this is the factories, it helps to know what the factories are looking for. Then we as shepherds can make those decisions about whether we want to grow those kinds of wool or not. If we want to have our wool in a commercial setting, then we have to have a certain quality that's going to be for apparel, and that's going to be used by commercial factories. And we as shepherds can make those choices. And so if that's what you want, then it needs to be fine wool. And it also needs to be low in veg matter. And so whether that's, changing the way that you feed your animals or putting coats on them so that you reduce the amount of veg matter, that's going to get you more money. Even if you're not going to sell to a commercial concern, if you have your animals coated, you can sell to the hand spinner market. And your shearing needs to be as clean as possible. You need to make sure that your shearer, or you, if you are doing the shear, you need to keep the belly wool, the tags, which is like the poop end, and the top knots on their head, out of the fleeces that you're putting up for going to a concern like this, or if even to be sold to hand spinners. Your shearing needs to be as clean as possible. So my call to action this time is, I think it is important, to buy made in the USA products. We need to support our own shepherds, our own cotton growers. So try to buy made in America, made in the USA products, and they are on the labels are clearly marked. And it's one small way that we can make our wardrobes more local. It'll be local-ish, right? It will at least be our own country. So until next time, of course, I always love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or any thoughts, please leave a comment, and keep on making.